Hello readers and writers, I'm MJ and welcome to my best books of 2023. Now this list has a fair bit of caveats. The first is that I had to read these books in the year 2023. They weren't necessarily released in 2023. In addition, these are books that did not appear on any other list prior to this. So they didn't appear on my science fiction list, my fantasy list, or my best LGBTQIA books list. So these are kind of like the leftover list that allows books that I really enjoyed that did not fit on these three criteria. But I found out that, when I was creating the list, I realized that there's a lot of really good books that I did read in 2023 that didn't necessarily fit on these lists, and so I decided I did need an overall category list as well. So the first 9 books are listed in no particular order, and then at the end, the 10th book will be my best book for this list. So the first book I have to share is The Brain, the story of you told by David Eagleman. And I don't know if any of you know, but I really enjoy studying the brain. I have a master's in developmental psychology, and even during my undergrad as well as grad school, I took a lot of classes that were on cognitive or neuropsychology. And there's just something very fascinating about the brain. Part of it comes from my own autistic experience, where seeing how my brain differs in relations to other individuals, and partly just the brain is such a fascinating thing that makes us who we are. But I don't use this information in my everyday life, and I graduated from school over a decade ago. So I've had this book on my shelves and decided to finally pick it up, and it was fantastic. There's nothing really new in here for me, but I do think that if you're interested in the brain at all, that it is a fantastic read. It takes very complex topics and explains them in a very simplistic way that makes it very relatable. And it's a good starting point to go then and learn more about it. Normally when I read nonfiction books that are more like cursory, I get frustrated because it's missing some aspect or element of it, and I didn't get that way in this book. If anything, I just felt nostalgic just because I was being reintroduced to concepts that I haven't had the ability to really talk or think about in a very long time, because it's just not something that naturally comes up in a topic or a conversation. If it does, most people don't want to hear about it. But fascinating read, and I highly recommend, if you're interested at all, that you pick it up. It's a great starting point for people with no familiarity whatsoever. Next book on the list is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I know this book is not a book for everyone, but for me as a nerd, I really resonated with it. It talks a lot about the video game industry. It talks a lot of behavior of people just holed up in their house getting stuff done. It does have very relationships that are not healthy, but I think it explores them in a way that shows that they're not healthy and how people can get into them and not be able to find their way out of them. And in that situation, I really resonate with that because being neurodiverse, that is more likely to happen. And I know while you didn't root for the relationship, you kind of saw the web that was being dealt and why it was inescapable. And there's a lot of emotions in this book. There's a lot going on, not all of it necessarily that I agreed with, but it was definitely a book that resonated with me more as a neurotypical, and had a little bit of nostalgia also with the old video game industry and such. So I did really enjoy Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Another nonfiction pick was Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmer, and this is written by an Indigenous botanist, so there's a lot of connection with nature in here. So it does go back to a lot of Indigenous culture, and I learned a lot while reading this book, but I specifically connected to this connection with nature and how nature can restore our soul, basically. And it's kind of in a place where I am, where I feel that need within myself, and I really felt that echoed in this novel, and like vindicated almost my own feelings. And then, like, I don't know, I really resonated a lot with this book. So it's one I again plan on rereading at some point, but definitely recommend everyone pick up. And I also plan on picking up her first book as well. Next on my list is Lessons in Chemistry, and it's kind of ironic to me that this book is on this list because I almost didn't pick this up. I saw this all over Bookstagram and didn't know anything what it was about, but I was like, oh cool, Lessons in Chemistry sounds like fun, and went and read the description in Target and was like, oh, I think I would actually really enjoy this. And then I brought it home and read the description again and was like, I don't think this book is for me, and almost unhauled it. But I picked it up, and I'm so glad I did, because this is definitely a strong favorite. I almost had it tie for my favorite book of the year, but decided that that would be cheesy, so I just put it as a book of the year. But it's definitely a very, very strong favorite of mine. I really resonated again with the main character, and in case you haven't like determined my what I really enjoy is I really like the characters that are quirky and not run-of-the-mill everyday characters, because I really resonate with that. And the main character is a chemist who is trying to make her way into this very male-dominated field back in the 60s, and then to do so as a parent, a single parent. There's just so many aspects of this that I resonated with. And then there's no specific neurodiverse rep in here, but there's definitely not neurotypical rep for the main character. And it was just such a great read, so emotional. I cried tears. And yeah, definitely one that will stay on my shelves because I do plan on reading it again at some point. So I have a couple of indie books that are on this list as well. So the first one is Lucky Penny. This is a YA thriller book, and I had read parts of it beforehand, little sections of it, so I knew it was going to be a good book, and I was really looking forward to reading it, but I didn't realize how much I would really enjoy it. Sometimes I like thrillers, sometimes they just really annoy me, and I don't typically vibe with YA books, but Lucky Penny was just, I don't know, I was just hooked from the beginning. It was very well written, very well developed characters. The main character is YA, just, you know, ending high school, starting to get ready for college, but not like annoyingly so. I mean, still very much a YA novel and very appropriate for a YA audience, but as an adult, it wasn't like off-putting for me personally. I still very vibed with the story. And there's just like, there's actually like two separate mysteries going on. So the main character's sister disappeared 10 years ago in the forest outside of their house. So there's that mystery. And then the main character's best friend 10 years later goes missing. And so there's that mystery. And so it's seeing how these mysteries are related, if they are related, and going through that whole cycle and just like trying to solve it with our main character. It was such a fascinating book. It is a duology, which I think is fascinating for a thriller. I don't think there's very many duologies. I've seen like series where each book is like almost a standalone, but like you have the same detective. And I've seen like standalone thrillers, but to have one that is a like duology thriller, I thought is very unique. And I absolutely adore it. It is indie written and published, and I plan on going and checking out the backlist of the author as well, who is an amazing human being. And you should really, really check this book out. The other book that I was kind of blown away with is The Mom Group. It's indie published as well. This is one that I had just like picked up on Instagram, and didn't necessarily expect to love, but I was very interested in, you know, the idea of it. You don't see a lot of literary fiction indie published books, and it was just, this book is captivating. It's just so different for an indie book, but also like kind of different from a traditionally published book. And it's just about a very eccentric main character that is not perfect, and you can relate to her with her imperfections, and I just really appreciate that. A lot of midlife crisis stuff going on, and just kind of like coming to terms now that, you know, kids are out of the house and you have your own identity. So it's kind of got like that rep as well, which is not represented in literature quite so much. And it's just really well written, and I really, really enjoyed it. So I highly recommend you check it out. Another book that I picked up is They Call Me Lionist. I read this via audiobook from the library. It is written by a Palestinian activist. Whether she meant to be or not, she's definitely become one. A young activist who I think now is just barely 20 and just was released from the second time from the Israeli prison. And it talks a lot about why she was arrested, her childhood growing up in a Palestinian community, and just her experience through the trial, through being arrested, and being arrested through a military imprisonment. And it was a lot, but it was also very well presented, and very impactful, because seeing it through someone's personal view, I think, made a lot of the facts that I'd been gathering make so much more sense, put it in context, and made me relate so much more with what's happening now, and what's been happening throughout my entire life. Another book I picked up, The Firekeeper's Daughter. I have had this on my shelf for a very long time, but I wasn't exactly sure what to expect with it, so I didn't know if I would enjoy it or not. And it started off almost like a YA hockey romance, and I was like, oh no, what am I in for? And then it just completely changed pace. And this book is fantastic, great characterization. There's mystery, there's heartbreak. Before 100 pages, I was in tears, but it's like one of those things that like let you show the heartbreak of a culture while also the joy, and that just position, having them both be in that book, I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate the author sharing. It was fantastically written. It's contemporary, and just shows a lot about indigenous cultures, but also had like this thriller aspect to it as well. There is the sequel out, and I can't wait to pick that up. Another book that I really enjoyed is a graphic novel called Speak Up. I do own this in physical copy, but I can't find it, so I don't have it to show you. But the art is fantastic. It is YA, but it's about the experience of an autistic person who is, you know, experiencing what it's like to grow up with autism. And it shows the autism rep is fantastic and on point. I like that it's in a graphic novel format, because not everyone who's autistic is obsessive as me with reading. And so it does provide an easier to read format for individuals who are autistic that may not read quite as much. Well presented, fantastic novel, and highly recommend it. So my top book of 2024 is Yellowface by R. Kwong. R. Kwong is a phenomenal writer that writes such a diverse range, and with Yellowface we have a contemporary novel about writing and publishing, specifically traditional publishing, and diversity in publishing and token diversity in publishing. And I wasn't like entirely set up for what was to come in this novel. I read like the synopsis, but I thought like something else was going to happen. But it starts off with a bang. Our main character is, you know, having lunch with a very famous novelist who happens to be a friend. They went, you know, college buddies together, and but not necessarily close friends. And she ends up choking and passing away while our main character is there, and our main character swipes the novel that she was working on, and then goes on to publish it as a white author, doing it, which is taking a look at Chinese historical fiction, and just like the whole journey that our author goes on, and like the whole concept of when does something become your own work if it's based off of somebody else, and plagiarism. There's just so many topics within this book, like even like the ethics of traditional publishing, but it's phenomenally written, in addition to all of the conversation that can be had. And I do find it slightly ironic that, you know, R. Kwong's a big author now, and has the ability to, you know, take a look back on traditional publishing while being traditionally published. And it's definitely a place of privilege, but also being, you know, a Chinese American author, which is not, and like all the just the complexities of all of this. But on top of that, just being a brilliant writer, who it's just all came down to being my top book of 2023. So yeah, if you have not picked up Yellowface yet, I highly recommend that you do so. It was a fantastic read. So these are my top books that didn't, you know, quite fall into science fiction, fantasy, or LGBTQIA reads. That doesn't mean none of these have those aspects in them, but they definitely deserve to be in this more encompassing category. I know it's very hard for me to have narrowed down my books into only one list, so because I just read so much this year, and there was just so much that was exceptional. And so while this is my last of lists, there's still some books that I wish I had put on here. But every top book definitely deserves its place, and every book on these lists deserves its place. And 2023 was a fantastic reading year for me, and I hope 2024 will be just as well. And I hope you join me on my journey by hitting like and subscribe, because it means a lot to me. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and until next time.